Hello, this is Fox Evening News from London. I'm Kesha Gitari. Let's start with the stories making headlines tonight. Ivory Coast government reaffirms security measures ahead of an international athletics event. The 2019 Africa Cup of Nations will now be held in June and July. And a 6.7 magnitude earthquake hits Greece and Turkey. A member of Ivory Coast security forces has died following an attack by unidentified gunmen on a police training school late on Wednesday. The incident occurred ahead of Friday's Francophonie Games in the capital Abidjan. The Games are the first major international event organised in Ivory Coast since the end of the Civil War. Some 4,000 athletes and artists from 53 countries are expected to attend. Nearly 10,000 soldiers, police and paramilitary officers have been mobilised to ensure security at the Games. The event's organisers and the government have said that the recent unrest would not impact the international event.
These are just sporadic operations to prevent the radiance of Ivory Coast, but no one today is capable of holding a hostile military position against loyalist authorities for an entire day. We are going to engage with determination, with a lot of energy, with seriousness to meet this challenge. Ivory Coast needs an army that is in tune with what we now represent in Africa and around the world. It is not an easy task in a country that is coming out of a crisis to put back an army that has been put together, as we know, on the right path.
The president of Ivory Coast National Assembly and former rebellion leader Guillaume Soro has publicly asked for forgiveness from the Ivorian people. Mr. Soro called for national reconciliation extends even to his political rival, former President Laurent Gbagbo, who currently is being detained in The Hague, where he's being tried by the International Criminal Court. The 45-year-old's request for pardon comes after the ICC on Wednesday decided to review whether to release the former leader, Mr. Gbagbo, for the rest of his crimes against humanity's trial.
Today, Ivory Coast needs more forgiveness and reconciliation. I think it's important. No one benefits from working against the stability of Ivory Coast. Here I want to ask Ivorians for forgiveness for everything I could have done, the mistakes I could have made, the offences I could have done. To the people who have suffered so much, I ask for forgiveness. I am also taking the initiative today to go and ask for forgiveness from my elders Henry Konan Bedi, President Alassane Ouattara, and even President Laurent Gbagbo. Even Gbagbo deserves that I ask him for forgiveness. I will ask forgiveness from everyone because since 2002 I have played an important role up until today, and I think that what Ivory Coast needs is much more tolerance, much more moderation, forgiveness, reconciliation, peace and stability.
Senegal's Supreme Court has rejected bail for Dakar's mayor on Thursday, preventing him from campaigning in the upcoming legislative elections. Mayor Khalifa Sall was arrested more than 4 months ago on corruption charges and has been continually denied bail. However, he is at the top of a list of opposition coalition candidates vying for the 165 seats in the July 30th vote. The mayor has not exhausted his appeals in the case, and another bail request is pending before the Senegalese court. Mayor Sall was seen as a strong contender for the presidency before he was arrested over the alleged misappropriation of 2.7 million euros in city funds. On Friday, rival supporters of President Macky Sall, no relation, and the mayor clashed in the northern part of Dakar, injuring several people. Mauritanian President Mohamed Ould Abdel Aziz kicked off his Yes campaign for the upcoming referendum that would change the constitution with a rally in the country's capital. Last weekend, several thousand people took to the streets to protest a controversial constitutional referendum due on August 5th. The No Coalition is drawn from a broad political spectrum, including Islamists and anti-slavery activists in the conservative West African nation, all of whom oppose measures including abolishing the Senate and changing the national flag.
I'll tour the country before coming back here in Nouakchott on Thursday for another rally. We must explain to you the reasons for changes asked for with the referendum. It's important for the future of our country.
Kenya's electoral body says it is facing more than 300 court cases from candidates, parties and civil society groups before elections on August 8th. The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has raised concerns about whether the disputes can be resolved in time. Any doubts over the legality of the election could spark protests by candidates contesting presidential, legislative or local seats. 2017 is set to be the most expensive election ever, expected to top $1 billion in aggregate spending and could be Africa's most expensive on cost per voter basis. A new pre-election economic and fiscal report released before the polls by the National Treasury said the preparation and execution of the election will cost $480 million. Ugandan police say they have arrested dozens of political opposition activists this week. The arrests coincide with speculation that President Yoweri Museveni will act to change the constitution to allow himself to run for another term in 2021. A Forum for Democratic Change official has stated that the group believes the arrest of 56 opposition party members on Wednesday is linked to the issue. On Thursday, 13 members of a smaller opposition party were arrested for illegal assembly. Uganda's constitution stipulates presidential candidates must be younger than 75 when they stand for election. The current president, who has held power for 31 years, will be 77 by the next election. An unidentified individual is in a coma after sustaining a head injury from stone throwing in a protest in the northern city of Al Hoceima in Morocco. Local authorities report saying that 72 security personnel and 11 civilians were injured after some 300 or 400 activists hurled stones at police forces who responded with tear gas. 2 police officers were seriously injured and remain in hospital. Hundreds of people had gathered on Thursday in the city of Al Hoceima despite an official ban. Security forces set up checkpoints to block people from joining the most recent protest in the city following weeks of unrest in the region.
There is repression everywhere. They are firing tear gas at us. We have nothing in this Morocco. We don't want confrontation. We are asking for our right peacefully, but they want to give us nothing. That's all.
We're in a country where there's no freedom of expression. We have nothing here. We're only looking for freedom. What have we asked for? Hospitals, work, transport? What's wrong with that? And what was the reply? It's hitting the people. They were in our homes in 1958, in 84, 86, until 2017 during the earthquake. They gave us nothing. They stole all the wealth we had here. It's a shame for them and for us.
The UN's Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations on Thursday clarified why the number of blue helmets in Sudan's Darfur region are being reduced. Let's take a listen.
The fact that there is much less fighting in most of Darfur. This is why the Security Council has decided that in most areas of Darfur, except the Jebel Mara area where the situation remains complicated and more tense, but in those other areas of Darfur, the uniform presence, particularly the military presence, will be reduced. Yes, there is pressure on peacekeeping budget. This is not new. There has always been a pressure on this budget, particularly as this budget has had become a very important one compared with the previous years. In any case, our duty and the objectives that we have that were laid out by the Secretary General is to make sure that our peacekeeping our peacekeeping operations evolve. Their mandate, their deployment, their format should evolve so that they remain consistent with the needs on the ground.
The Herero people in Namibia are breaking their silence more than a century after the genocide that almost wiped out their tribe. They are demanding an apology, compensation and the return of their land from both Germany and their own country. Let's find out more in our next report.
Several of Veronica's ancestors were killed by German soldiers at the beginning of the 20th century. Like most of the residents of this township in northern Namibia, she is part of the Herero tribe. It's a group that almost disappeared when 80% of its members were killed in a genocide organized by German colonizers in 1904.
The Germans gave my grandmother hardship. She grew up among foreign people. She was forced to speak a foreign language. And we are living in poverty because of what they did to us at the time. Now we want them to restore our dignity. Reparations must come, and we want our land back.
This small plaque is the only reminder of Herero suffering in the heart of a cemetery for fallen German soldiers. After a century, negotiations are finally underway between the German and Namibian governments over an official apology and reparations. But the talks are pointless in the eyes of most Herero people and their Nama counterparts, another rebel tribe decimated by the colonizers.
I don't expect anything from this negotiation because they are suspect from day one. The way they are crafted says that every Namibian is affected. It is denying the fact that the Namas and Hereros were affected. So these negotiations are flawed from the beginning to the end.
Traditional chiefs of the two tribes are seeking three-way negotiations, like those staged between Israel, Germany, and Jewish leaders following the Holocaust. They don't trust the Namibian government, made up of the majority Ovambo people, to negotiate on their behalf.
Hereros and Namas are not the majority in our government, and of course they will want to see the government really, taking that into account, and that is already being taken care of.
But the two minority groups feel discriminated against. They say the government remains insensitive to the suffering of their ancestors, allowing a beachside campsite at an area that was once a concentration camp.
Over to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the anti-corruption campaign group Global Witness says 20% of the country's mining revenue has failed to reach the nation's treasury. In a statement, the group claimed the revenues totaling $750 million over 3 years disappeared. The group says funds from the mining sector have previously found their way into offshore shell companies, but the new findings uncover that even revenues paid to the government bodies within the country never make it to the treasury. And a report by a US-based Congo research group has found that the presidential family owns stakes in more than 80 companies at home and abroad, likely to be worth tens of millions of dollars. The report by a group at the University of New York is based almost entirely on public records such as land titles and incorporation documents. It is the most comprehensive mapping to date of the Kabila family's fortune after 2 decades in charge of Africa's top copper-producing country. And a court in Nigeria has ordered the temporary seizure of property worth $37.5 million belonging to the former oil minister Dezani Alison Madueke. The seizure is part of a series of cases brought by the country's anti-corruption agency. Ms. Alison Madueke is currently out on bail in London, where she was arrested on corruption allegations. Well, we're heading into a short break, but still to come on this evening's programme. A 6.7 magnitude earthquake rocks Greece and Turkey. Asylum seekers clash with police officers in Greece. And violent crime is on the rise in the UK.